Okay, now next we'll be talking to you about the arguments here. Now, whenever we present an idea, whenever we present a topic, of course there will be several different outcomes, several different ways to look at a certain topic. Now, the purpose of TOK is for us to examine these perspectives and to look at it from basically an omniscience point of view, where we examine all the outcomes and we examine all of the arguments. In our presentation, we'll be examining two arguments. First of all, why do people immigrate? Okay, from a historical, you could say somewhat psychological perspective. And then the second one is the TOK breakdown, where we examine things like the culture, the traditions of those people, their imagination, their reason, as to why those people immigrate. So first of all, why do people immigrate?
There are several reasons to which why people immigrate, and since we want to apply this to our real-life situation, which is immigration in France, first of all, we have to give you a background, a historical background of why immigrants seek refuge in a country like France. First of all, France used to be a colonial empire. France controlled large swaths of territory on the African continent, North America, and also parts of Asia. The populations that lived formerly under French rule were given independence shortly after following World War II. In the 1950s up until the early 1970s, there was a process of slow decolonization of France's former territories in Africa, specifically Africa. When France retreated from these countries and gave them their independence, those countries did not have the elements and the conditions that would create a prosperous state. Corruption was widespread, poverty was also widespread, there was a lack of education, health, etc. And therefore those people lived a lot of misery as soon as the French left their countries. And therefore, one of the major reasons, perhaps the major reason of why immigrants, predominantly from Africa, Northern Africa, immigrate to France is poverty and instability in their mother countries. Those people, the reason why France originally colonized these countries were to gather natural resources. And therefore, these countries, as soon as France retreated from them, have been receiving annual aid. It's a form of masked colonization, in which France would keep those countries dependent on them for aid. Eventually, these countries cannot live separately, and the people will have to immigrate once, eventually. Wealth and eventually, since France utilized these resources and these vast resources that they have harvested from these colonies, France is industrialized and is living in a state of wealth and opportunities. And which all these elements make France and other countries in Europe, but specifically France, a very attractive destination for immigrants.
Okay, so as my friend said, he gave you guys the historical reasoning behind why would they want to, why would immigrants choose to go to France, and specifically France over other countries. Now, it's my job to give you guys the TOK breakdown as to why people choose to perform such an action. The first one we'll be talking about is imagination. Now, without even thinking about it, France is mostly known for having that beautiful, you could say, scenery. They have the Eiffel Tower, it's very famous for having the scenery, it's very famous for having those monuments. It's very attractive. If anything, we idealize them a bit too much, and they are glorified very much in the media. And so us, as mere bystanders, all we see from France is this glorified image of what it is and what it offers. And so to the normal person, to the normal working class person who is seeking refuge, how he would choose to go to a specific place over the other is influenced by the information he receives. In this case, that information is in the form of media. So when the media glorifies a certain country such as France in terms of the opportunities it offers, the tranquility it has, the monuments it possesses, how beautiful the landscape is, how nice the people are, how developed the society is, that person has this idealized image of France in his mind that may or may not be true. But then, however, he decides to go to it, he decides to go to France, because according to him, according to what he knows, because he's limited by his own knowledge, according to what he knows, France is the best, it is the optimum decision for him to choose. Now secondly, it's his reason. Now reason can be somewhat shot into the historical background into this. As my friend said, now France used to colonize these countries. When France colonized these countries, the people that were living in these colonized states, they were under the rule of France. Now normally, France was somewhat tranquil, somewhat peaceful. The government was not exactly very corrupt in the time where France ruled over them. So what would happen as soon as corruption were to erupt in a state where France left? If France were to take over a country, and then you see that that country has tranquility, has peace, everything is going good, and then France leaves, and then corruption suddenly erupts. You, as a person who's living there, thinks that the reason why we were peaceful, the reason why we were okay, was because France basically held us in their iron clutch, was because we were under the rule of France. So because of that, they feel like France is a sort of refuge, because they have experience with it. Since France ruled over them and they were okay, as soon as France would leave and then political unrest would arise, the people, the only thing they would think of was, when France was with us, this didn't happen to us, we were okay actually. And so what they choose to do is they actually choose to go, you could say, they choose to run back to their mother's arms. They choose to go back to France. Because they believe in their minds, due to their reason, that when France actually had them, when they were under the rule of France, they were peaceful and they were tranquil. Now the third reason that examines what we studied in TOK was the religion. Now normally people would choose to go to a place where they can experience religious freedom, where they can represent themselves in whatever way they choose to represent themselves. Now you could say, now several people believe that, wait, but France isn't that type of country. I mean, they chose to ban the hijab. That's a clear, that shows that they're not exactly very fond of the Islamic, of the Muslim way and the Muslim traditions. But then compare France to other countries. Let's compare France to the first country that comes to anyone's minds when it comes to immigration, especially since we're examining the Arab part of it here. Let's say America. Now compare France and America. America have been known to be extremely condescending, extremely demeaning when it comes to the representation of Islamic Muslims in the form of media. France, on the other hand, says that their reasons for banning the hijab is due to security reasons. And it's not exactly because terrorism and whatnot and the misrepresentation. Whereas on the other hand, even us as Muslims, when we think of America and how they see us as Muslims, the first thing we think of is how they believe all we are terrorists and whatnot. However, and they do show it when and it's like they're fueling our own agitation when they talk about the war against terrorism and whatnot. It is the only sense of insecurity we receive. However, when it comes to France, what they talk about for their motives behind banning the hijab is actually because of security reasons. Because they want to make sure that no person can wear a hijab and a niqab and then say, and then actually and be actually a man and then wearing a hijab or a niqab. And then say, oh wait, I can pass through this airport security here and no one can do anything to me because I'm wearing a hijab and a niqab. For a normal, rational person, it does make sense. Even though it is an impeachment of their own religious freedom, it does make sense. So you as a person who has a choice, where would you go to? To a country that somewhat throats on your own religious freedom, but for valid security reasons, or for a country that is demeaning and is condescending to your own religion, through means way beyond that of security. So normally, as a normal bystander who wants to be presented with options, you would choose France over America or over any other country, due to several reasons. And even though religious freedom is limited to security purposes, it might actually bring peace to people to realize that France cares so much about their security, to the extent that they can actually ban the hijab and the niqab. It's not because, granted, they might do it for their own ulterior motives, but us, all we receive is what they say. And as far as what they said, it was due to religious purposes. Security purposes, my bad. Now the next thing would be natural. Now this is where it gets kind of fun. Okay, next thing would be the natural sciences. Now, us as Arabs, when we think of Europe, okay, as men, we think of the beautiful, white-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Swedish violet. No, never mind. We actually think of the beautiful prospects that exist on the other end of the table, that exists in France. And so, normally, it might be a subconscious or an innate desire. However, nonetheless, it is a desire that exists in all humans for them to seek the most, the best prospect for them, or the best spouse. And so, normally, it's a very known idea that what you can't have, you want. And what you do have, you don't care about. And so for us, for the dark-skinned Arabs, it is what we don't have is the white-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde-haired women. And even vice versa for the men. And so that is actually what we seek, that's actually what we want. We want to have that person as a spouse. And so even though it might be a small piece to the puzzle, it is still a subconscious and innate desire as to why we want to go to a certain country and seek a certain place over another. Because come to think about it, the whole idea of humanity, the whole thing revolves around instinct of survival. And survival has to do with picking a spouse, getting married, and having children. And so the truth is, it's actually a much bigger, it has a much bigger effect than what we give it credit for. Because choosing a spouse is a major part of survival. It is survival, choosing a spouse and having kids. So as a matter of fact, it's actually a much bigger aspect of it, but we choose to do it subconsciously because we already have that desire in us that we don't exactly examine very much. And then next we have the human sciences. Now why do people psychologically choose to go to one place over another? Why do people choose to go to, let's say, France over, let's say, Japan or Indonesia? Now that can be due to several reasons, which I will give a brief explanation. First of all, it is the need to have power, to have money, otherwise known you could say as greed or ambition. And so the first thing those people will seek is financial security, which can be gained through employment. And so those people who are experiencing political unrest might not be receiving employment. So their first decision would be to go to a place where they can receive employment. And where France then deems to be a very good prospect for these people. It deems to be a very good decision to go to France over the other countries. That combined with the factor of liberty, that combined with the factor of freedom, that combined with the factor of a lot of opportunities, makes France a very, let's say, glorified or idealized prospect in choosing over other countries.
And now for perspectives. In order for us to fully understand the scope of this topic, we need to take in consideration the perspectives of different elements, of different factions who are involved in this topic. First of all, we'll start from the perspective of the immigrant. What is the perspective of someone who wants to immigrate to France? What are the reasons that would drive him to, and also the excuses, or let's say, the drive that would inspire such immigrants to migrate to France and live there? First of all, it is the reclamation of rights. As I mentioned earlier in the historical section, France formerly colonized large territories of land, and many of the immigrants that actually immigrate to France and live in France today are citizens of former colonies of France. And within their mentality, they believe that they are not going there and they are not going to France. It is not a favor on behalf of the French that they are giving them asylum or the right to work. It is their right to go there and work, because the reason why, in their perspective, the reason why France is such a developed country, the reason why French people and French society is has such wealth and affluence, is because their exploitation of the resources of their countries. Slavery, hundreds of thousands of people were enslaved from these former colonies and taken back to France, and they aided in the industrialization process of France. And therefore they believe that immigrating to France and sharing the wealth and enjoying the fruits of French civilization is a right because they have contributed to it. Another aspect is liberty. Many countries, many of the countries of origin that the immigrants come from are dictatorships. They are very oppressive countries. They do not have the right of self-expression, the right of freedom of religion and other human rights. France, on the other hand, is a liberal haven for such rights and such leisures, if you can put it in that way. Another thing is opportunities, employment. The French economy is one of the largest, in fact, it's the second largest economy in the European continent. The French economy is large and it has many job opportunities, a wide scope of opportunities. And therefore it is very natural for France and for an immigrant to see all of these elements that would draw him to France to work there and live there permanently.
You know, after my colleague here has explained why, and from an immigrant's perspective, why would he choose to go to a certain country, or how would he think about going to a certain country, now it's time for us to examine it from the French perspective. First of all, we're actually going to divide this into just simply two classes, let's say the elite class and then the working class. First of all, we'll talk about the elite class, which is such as the political parties, you could say, or the business class elites. Okay? Now, first of all, it's actually, the idea here can be somewhat controversial. First of all, you have the political aspect of it. Now, the political parties here might believe that the people who are immigrating to France are taking away the opportunities of the people that reside in France. They are taking away the work opportunities, they are invading them, it's an impeachment of their sovereignty, etc. and etc. and etc. And so they believe that they are actually uncomfortable with such invasion, if you can put it into such context, of these immigrants trying to get into their country. But however, they do not see the motives of why these immigrants come to their country. They don't see that they're only seeking asylum. However, they seek it as an invasion. They have nothing to do here. Why are they here? They're just taking away from the work of our working class citizens. As a political party, you would want to not only you would want to receive the favor of as many people as possible, especially the French people. And so what you would do is you would try to say that, oh wait, these people are taking away from your job opportunities. No, they're not allowed here. We'll kick them out. And you do that in order to gain the favor of these working class people, so the working class people can say, oh, he actually cares about us. He cares about the work we get, and he cares about how much money we make. And because of that, you will receive the favor of these working class people as a political personnel. Now the second opinion can be seen as the business class opinion. Now this is actually a very important one. Now as an immigrant, okay, who does not have money and who is experiencing political unrest in his country, and they choose to seek refuge in another country, would you demand a pay of like $5,000 a month? Or would you settle for anything just to barely meet ends meet? And so, in fact, business people, they exploit this. Because they know for a fact that the immigrants would settle for a much lesser pay than a Frenchman, they choose to employ an immigrant over a Frenchman because they know for a fact that they will be paying them less money. More than that they can exploit them. So overall, they will be receiving more hours, more working hours, and they will be making more money. So I guess you could say, even though it is the most efficient decision to save more money and increase productivity, it is still abuse, it is still exploitation. Now here is an example of the political opinion, okay, from a political personnel. Her name is Marine Le Pen. She is a political, you could say, she is a member of a right-wing party in France. Okay, she's an up there political personnel in France, and basically she can be said to be, let's say, very racist. Let's say, and so this is one of the quotes she has, in an interview where she says, "How many Mohammed Mirahs in the boats, the airplanes that arrive each day in France?" Now the question here lies is, who is Mohammed Mirahs? Okay, now she's talking about the concept of immigration. Now Mohammed Mirah was actually a person who committed several shootings in France in the year 2012 in 2 locations. I believe there were 3 shootings where several people were killed. Now as you can see here, it is a clear, you could say, act of racism, where she basically was saying that Arabs or all these people that immigrate act as a threat to the national security of France.
And now, from the perspective of a working class Frenchman, what is the opinion of the common French citizen, the common French people, from this influx of immigrants into their country? Let's say, first of all, France is a welfare, you can say it's a liberal state, it is a semi-socialist state. Therefore, the country provides many of the basic services that are needed by the citizen. The government provides free healthcare, the right to education, among other services that are for free in contrast with other, let's say, the US, that is a purely capitalist state. The French, as I mentioned earlier, the French economy provides a lot of jobs and business opportunities. However, and as my colleague mentioned earlier, of how business elites and the business owners and the owners of large multinational companies based in France, in their opinion, they benefit from this influx of immigrants because they can exploit them due to their low demands in fields of wages. However, this reflects negatively, very negatively, on the future and on the opportunities and the rights of the normal French citizen. A French citizen there is a minimum wage in which a French citizen can have, and any person can have in France. Now, immigrants, illegally of course, are an exception to this law because they can settle for any low wage without complying with the law. And this comes in the benefit of the business owners. But for the French citizen, it is the loss of a job opportunity. These immigrants are invading and taking over the rights and the opportunities of French citizens. Eventually, unemployment rates will rise amongst French citizens, poverty will increase, and basically, from the perspective of the average French citizen, his future is robbed. And this will normally harbor negative views against such immigrants, which will cause a rise in intolerance, racism, and eventually, in many cases, this has caused violence in ghettos and other suburbs. And this is a quote by French President François Hollande. These are often workers who do not know what tomorrow will bring. Pensioners who can't hope anymore, farmers who fear for the survival of their farms, the young who ask themselves, where is our future? And here the President of France, who is liberal, who is pro-immigration, is addressing the concerns of the French citizens who are actually voting for Marine Le Pen, who is the president of the right-wing party, which is also his political opponent, trying to appease the French people.
Now, lastly, we'll be talking about the outcomes of the analysis as to why do people immigrate. Now, we've discussed several factors, which I will try to briefly go over here in a couple of seconds, if not a minute. Now, first of all, it comes to their motives of why going there psychologically. They want to go there because they will find employment. They want to go there because, due to their reason, they believe that because France took them over before, they will take them again. Third, because of their rights, they believe that since France colonized them and exploited all their resources and then went away, they believe that, oh wait, their success is dependent on our failure, and because of that, it is our right for us to go and to basically take from them what they took from us. And then lastly, a very huge major part of it is actually the culture. Now, when it comes to the Arab people, it is the norm or the custom of Arab people to have several children. Let's say 5 or 4 to 6 children. However, in Europe, that is nowhere near the actual number of how much a European couple is said to have. A European couple is said to have 1 is the normal, 1.3 is the average, 2 is like too much, and then you have 0, which is the norm. But 1.3 is the average, so it's 1 child per couple on average. Whereas you have an Arab couple who has like 5 children. So throughout time, you will see an exponential growth of Arab people, and they're actually going to grow much faster than the French people. And so those Arab people, due to their traditions, their culture, will actually grow much larger in numbers than the Arab people, than the French citizens. So eventually that minority will actually become a majority in the country.
Some pessimists might say that France and countries like Germany would become Islamic republics in 50 years due to this rise of Muslim populations there and the decrease of the native populations.
So that's basically it in a nutshell, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask me.
Are you pro-immigration?
I am pro-immigration because I believe it is a human's right to seek refuge in any country he seeks. Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr.
You were talking about before in your reasons, some of the reasons for some of the citizens to choose France over, say, America is because of the perception that America has a more negative opinion towards Muslims. But it can be argued that, okay, we understand banning the niqab for security reasons. Banning hijab for security reasons, doesn't that sound a little bit extreme? And it's known that the French went a little bit further than that, and that they banned the building of extra mosques, that minarets could not be raised in France anymore, and that, even just speaking to people who've been to France, the French people seem to have a more hostile reaction to Arabs and Muslims that go there. Is that something that can be considered as well, or do you still really believe that France is so much more accepting of Muslims than America?
Well, sir, it is very legitimate what you said, but what's a factor that, as I mentioned, that France has that the US doesn't, is because France has the majority of the immigrant population of France are Muslims and Arabs, and therefore most of them are single people who will go there to seek work, and eventually the largest factor that leads to this exponential rise in immigrant populations is because these people would reunite with their families. They would bring their families from home into France. Whereas in the US, usually it's a much longer destination for immigrants to go to the US than to France. And because France is much more familiar, because already having the factor of family members already residing in France, it would make it much easier and much more appealing for an immigrant to go to France because of that factor of having family there.
One other point that came to my mind when you guys were talking about reason, as you were explaining, I thought to myself, maybe another reason may be that if France occupied most of these countries, then these people already know how to speak the French language, right? So one of the decisions that they might do, for example, we know this with Algerians and other people, they'll go across the because, no, okay, I already know how to speak the language, I don't have to learn how to speak French, as opposed to maybe going to a Western country where they have to speak English.
Exactly. In fact, a large number of the immigrants are actually Maghribi, so who are capable of speaking the language very fluently. So they choose to go to France because of their familiarity with the language and the customs and traditions.
So that was a good presentation. It was really enlightening because always I thought in my head that if you were occupied by a country, the first thing that you wanted to do is try and break away from them and get away from them. But you guys have changed it to see that actually people want to go back to that. So it's interesting. Thank you.
No problem. Are there any more questions? Thank you very much.